over the last few days, I have been spending a lot of time with this phone here, the Unihertz Luna, a phone which, let's be honest here, takes a fair amount of, let's say, inspiration from the Nothing Phone 1, and today we're going to review this phone. Before we go any further, I want everybody to have the context that this phone is $299 right now. There is a sale running for its launch. $329 might become the regular price shortly thereafter. So that kind of gets you in the right headspace for how we should be judging this phone. This is not a $500, $600, $700 phone. This thing is $299. Let's start things off with a quick rundown of the hardware itself. So the Unihertz Luna does have a 6.81-inch screen, which runs at 60 Hertz. While I don't think it's totally the fault of that 60 Hertz refresh rate, I do have to say that the action of scrolling through things, doing things in general on this device does have a slightly higher level of jankiness, lagginess, stutteriness than I was expecting, and more so than some of the other Unihertz phones that I have been using. Now, I don't want to overblow this and make it sound like the thing is just absolutely struggling to scroll through Twitter, because that's not really the case. But what I'm saying is, you're going to be aware that it's a 60 Hertz refresh rate screen if you're coming from something with a higher refresh rate. And the fact that this thing does have a lower end system on a chip, a MediaTek Helio G99 MT6789, this is a MediaTek processor, you're going to be aware of that. This thing does not fly through the operating system quite like other devices, let's be honest, in its price range actually can. In terms of just the screen itself, looking at something, it actually does generally look okay. Viewing angles are all right. The colors are nice and poppy. No real complaints there. If you flip it around to the back, of course, it is covered with this array of LEDs, which is basically the selling feature of this phone. These LEDs can be used to show you music visualization. It can be used to show you notifications or charging, or it can just be turned on whenever you want to have lights turned on back there, I guess. A couple more things to get out of the way here. I could not find any mention of an IP rating on their website for this device. IP ratings for their other devices, no mention here. So as far as water and dust resistance, probably not something I would be wanting to test on my own. There is no 5G on this device, which is honestly, in the year 2023, kind of a problem, kind of a big deal. We got to have 5G on these devices at this point. It does have 8 gigs of RAM, which isn't terrible, 256 gigs of storage, which is actually very, very good. It does have dual nano SIM, another great thing, and a side-mounted fingerprint scanner, which works relatively well. It's not the fastest in the world, but it does the job admirably well, I would say. No problems at all. The Unihertz Luna is running Android 12 out of the box. Another issue from Unihertz is that I probably wouldn't recommend expecting Android 13 to be coming anytime soon. Probably not coming at all. Unihertz kind of has a bit of a track record with not keeping updates flowing to their phone, security updates, and things like this. You're pretty much buying it for what it is right now, which, let's be honest, that's what you should be doing in general, but even more so with a device like this. If you're cool with Android 12, great, because that's probably where you're going to be. The launcher is fairly bare bones, not really a lot going on there. I did go ahead and install Nova Prime because I think it's just still the best normal looking launcher on Android. So that's what you're going to be seeing in this video. Overall, there's really not a lot of bloat at all. They have their toolbox application, which has a few little nifty things in there, and then some built-in settings to control these shortcut keys there on the side of the device. It lets you basically program these keys to do 3 different things per key. There's 2 of them. So 2 programmable keys with 3 actions apiece. That's actually really, really cool, and I'm glad that they stuck with this for the Luna. There's also a whole host of controls here to control the LED lights found on the back of the device. Let's quickly go through what all you can do here. So flashes for incoming calls, notifications, music visualization, and then always on. I actually have a shortcut key programmed to just turn that light always on. You can see that it's flashing, and that is because we have the ambient light feature turned on. And what it's supposed to be doing is it's supposed to be looking at what's on the screen and then giving you lights that are similar to what it thinks is on screen. oftentimes it just does random stuff like this. So let's try and like open up a picture or something. So here you go. This picture is blue and the lights are blue. This picture is mostly green and the lights are mostly green. You can see here, like, with some pictures, it does an okay job with this. It's nothing incredible, but it kind of, I don't know, it's kind of a neat little party trick, I guess. Like I said, music visualization is there as well. But I'm not actually going to demo it in this because it's a lot of just flashing lights and it's not something I particularly enjoy. You can go in though and change different colors, which they call patterns, but it's not really a pattern. It's more just a color. But you can go in and change to all these different colors and kind of get it to look how you want. And then, like I said, you can turn it off and on with a shortcut key, or you can use this widget that they built for, which can turn the thing off and on like completely. But you can also toggle different sort of settings. So there's for calls, notifications, music visualizer. This one just turns it always on, always off. Then you have the one that's supposed to change based on what's on the screen, and then the one that turns on when you're plugging it in to charge. So there's not like a ton of stuff you can do with this light, but I don't know. I'm going to show you at least one more thing a bit later when we talk about the camera that I think is kind of neat. But overall, I mean, it is a gimmick, right? Like, it's a gimmick with the Nothing phone, and it's even maybe more of a gimmick here with this phone for reasons that we'll also get into a bit later. One interesting thing is that this phone appears to charge at right around 18 watts. It does have a 5,000 milliamp hour battery, but you may be, fooled into thinking this thing has a wireless charging coil here, because that's what that is on the Nothing phone. On this device, that is not a wireless charging coil at all. It's nothing. We can quickly look here at the few additional things they've added into Android for this. So Intelligent Assistant, they have a couple of interesting things here, like the ability to block particular apps from having mobile data or Wi-Fi data. That's kind of interesting. There's an app blocker, a call recorder, a freezer, which basically is, I think it's like their version of like a locker. And it looks like it actually will hide away applications themselves. So that's an interesting feature potentially as well. They have a QR code scanner, I believe is what that is. Yep. And then some more settings. Status bar cannot be pulled on a lock screen. Ringtone volume gradually increases. And then fingerprint vibrator. You can change kind of some settings there. Nothing too crazy. And other than that, guys, it's pretty much bone stock Android. Looking at some of their other pre-installed applications, of which there are very, very few, there is a remote application for the inbuilt IR scanner, which is an interesting thing to still have. I haven't messed with this much because I don't really have many things that I would need an IR blaster on. I think it said scanner a second ago. I meant IR blaster. This is basically turn your phone into a remote control for different applications, maybe your television and air conditioner, things like that. Interesting to have, but not something that I'm going to find particularly useful. There's an FM radio because you do have a 3.5 millimeter headphone jack, so that's something that's built in as well. And again, other than that, it's pretty much bone stock Android, guys. In terms of speaker quality, we are dealing with a single bottom firing mono speaker. Here is a quick sound sample. And as you can probably hear there, the audio is distorting quite a bit. It really does not sound great. It's relatively loud, but when you compare it to another device, even one that's not necessarily known for having the best speakers in the world, I think that you will find a fairly large gap in the overall quality of the sound coming out of that speaker. For your everyday stuff like TikTok, YouTube videos, things like that, the speaker's probably fine, but in terms of like high quality music, stuff like that, it's gonna fall quite short of most other phones. Let's take a second now and talk about that MediaTek processor. I think it's actually one of the weaker aspects of this device. If you load up something like Geekbench 6 and you run that benchmarking tool on this device, the single core is like 720 and the multi-core is like 1989. Okay, that is a fairly low score, let's be honest. Almost every mid-range phone on the market is going to nearly double that thing up. It's quite a low score. If you go over to something like the Wildlife test in, what is it called, 3D Mark, a device like my Surface Duo 2, I think, was almost 5 times a higher score. It scored a 1238. It's very, very slow. Now, that being said, if we jump into some games, which I'll have on the screen now, it actually performed better than I thought it would, but it's mostly because Android games just don't actually require that much power to run. PUBG Mobile ran okay. I was able to run around and actually get a kill on what I can only imagine as a bot. If that was an actual person, you are terrible at this game, even worse than I am. And then, of course, a game like Mario Kart ran pretty much flawlessly. I was able to win my first ever race of Mario Kart on my phone using the Unihertz Luna, and it did okay. However, the act of actually jumping from app to app, using the phone, going from YouTube to Twitter to Reddit to whatever I'm using at that moment, I did feel some slowdowns. I did feel a little bit of jankiness there. There were times when it definitely did start to chug going from task to task. It is a slow processor, and it's going to feel like a slow processor. Now, one benefit of having a relatively slower processor and then pairing that with a 5,000 milliamp hour battery is going to be pretty darn solid battery life. On a normal day, I was getting like 6 or 7 hours of screen on time. That is very, very solid. But again, you're getting that because you have a huge battery, and let's be honest, this thing is kind of a chonker, guys. So there's this phone. Let's compare it to another phone. They're both wearing a relatively thin case, but there it is next to the S23 Ultra. This is a chonker of a device. These both have 5,000 milliamp hour batteries, and one is just really, really thick, and it's actually fairly heavy too, 298 grams. But again, you pair all that together. Big honking battery, slower processor, you're going to get pretty good battery life out of it. At this point, we need to talk about the camera setup because it is actually a very, very strange camera setup. You have, in fact, a 108 megapixel primary camera, so you're probably thinking S22 Ultra camera, confirmed. No, it's not. We'll look at some samples in a minute. You also have a 20 megapixel night vision camera. You heard me correctly, a night vision camera, and then a 2 megapixel macro lens. You know how I feel about macro cameras. When they're 2 megapixels, they are effectively useless. And then I believe the selfie camera is, yes, in fact, a 32 megapixel camera. So let's jump over to Google Photos and we will take a look at some of these samples. So here we are indoors in sort of so-so lighting. The colors are very yellow and very strange here. This is just not accurate in terms of the colors. It looks very strange. When you zoom in, not particularly detailed either. I mean, it's passable, but you're going to have to go in and you're going to have to tweak some stuff here. Let's go into the color and maybe like we dewarm it. Dewarm it? Boy, that sounded gross. Let's just change that a little bit. I mean, that's a little bit closer. We had to really drop that warmth a lot. It really made that look quite unrealistic. Photo here of Spider-Man. You can see that it did okay. It's not like super, super sharp, but it's okay. Pretty blown out here in these brighter lights. And that just is something that you're going to deal with. Dynamic range is just really bad. If you're taking pictures of something that's very bright, it's just going to blow it out and turn it into the surface of the sun. If you get outside in really good lighting, it's okay, right? Like it actually takes some halfway decent photos. You can actually enable a 108 megapixel mode that, to my eye, looks indiscernible from the normal mode because they're just not doing a lot of processing to begin with. In really good lighting, it's actually capable of doing okay. We're a little bit out of focus there, but overall, you could post this online and nobody would think anything about it. Okay, so we are shooting video at 2K, which is the maximum video quality. I have also enabled EIS, electronic image stabilization, in the settings. I don't think it's doing anything very impressive, but yeah, if you want to know what the video quality is like on the Unihertz Luna, this is pretty much what you're looking at, guys. Can it focus on this up close? It did an okay job there. Let's come over here. Can we focus automatically? Not too bad. I'm actually kind of curious to see how this looks myself. Now, I actually tried to use portrait mode here, and as you can see, it did not do anything in regard to portrait mode, and I believe that's because unless it detects a face, it ain't portrait mode nothing. So I took some samples of my face, and you can see here that the blur is pretty smudgy looking. It's not the greatest looking blur I've ever seen. It's really softened everything in the foreground as well, moving into some more even lighting, and it has smoothed the living daylights out of me. And again, the blur, really not impressive. Portrait mode is quite bad in my estimation. And this is a pretty interesting feature. This is infrared ghost hunt mode. No, I'm kidding. This is infrared video. And this room is not like pitch dark, obviously, like it's still daytime outside, but it's pretty dark. And it's doing a pretty good job of illuminating everything. It has those LED emitters there on the back. Let's actually turn these, speaking of LEDs, Let's turn those off, and you can see there. I mean, like that plant is much more visible on the screen than it is in in real life. Kind of a cool novel feature, I feel like. But if you ever find yourself like needing to look for something in the dark, I think it's going to do a pretty good job of that. If you were wondering if having the LEDs on in the back would be sufficient illumination for anything, I mean, no, unless you're getting very, very close to something. And then, yeah, it actually works, relatively well. But of course, these LEDs don't throw super far. One cool place they may be useful, though, is in macro photography. And indeed, it was kind of neat because the macro camera is 2 megapixels and it's terrible. It's just bad. You need a lot of light for something like this, and you're not always going to have a lot of light. But you can turn the lights on the back, and that's better, right? Like it's still terrible, but it's actually better. This is a problem that they had. Another one of their phones with the exact same lousy 2 megapixel macro. You're up really close, you're putting a shadow on the thing you're taking a picture of. So it winds up absolutely looking terrible. Well, now you can kind of solve that problem yourself by turning on the LEDs on the back. So that's kind of cool. The macro camera is still useless. The night vision thing is still kind of neat to me in a weird way. I don't know how often you're going to use it, though. The primary camera, it's just really hit or miss for me, okay? If things are really well lit and stationary, it's going to put out some fairly passable, decent-looking photos. But as soon as it starts to get a little bit darker, the colors get really out of whack, and the motion blur problem, if you think it's bad on the Samsung phones, it's a whole heck of a lot worse here. Processing just is not good enough. And this kind of brings me to my final conclusion about this device. A lot of these very same complaints, right? Like not very good camera performance, bone stock Android with not a lot of added features, updates are probably never coming. All of these things are true of most of the other Unihertz phones that I gave pretty favorable reviews to, right? Like the Titan Slim, the Tank, the TikTok to a lesser degree, kind of for the same reasons I'm going to talk about here for the Luna. And those reasons are that I could forgive them of their sins because they had a novel feature that you were buying the phone for, right? The Titan Slim has that keyboard, and it's a really good keyboard for a smartphone. If you don't have a BlackBerry still in your pocket and you want an Android phone with a keyboard, it's one of the better options because of that keyboard. If you look at the Tank, if you're looking for that kind of thing, like a survivalist phone, you can forgive those other things because it's really good at being the Tank. With the Luna, I'm going to have to forgive the camera. I'm going to have to forgive the performance. I'm going to have to forgive a lot of problems with the software that I'd like to see improved on. And what I get for forgiving those things are lights on the back. And those just aren't that useful, and they're not enough to overcome those shortcomings in the way that the other Unihertz phones could for me. At the end of the day, I just think it's one of the more subpar phones that Unihertz has put out, at least of the ones I've tested. It doesn't have anything that grabs me and says, yeah, but there's this thing that makes it cool. The lights are neat, but they're just not that. And if you really, really want these lights, instead of paying $299 for this, look for a nothing phone on Facebook Marketplace or something, eBay. You can probably find it for $400, $450, or heck, just go brand new and get it. I think it was like $500 or something like that. Save up a couple hundred more dollars and do that. You're going to have a device that is significantly faster, has a far better camera, is getting software updates, so forth and so on. And if the lights aren't that important to you, why are you looking at that phone? It's the only thing that it kind of has. Go buy a Pixel 6a for like $250 and have a fantastic phone at everything. I just don't know who this phone is for. And honestly, this pains me to say this for a few reasons. One, Unihertz has been very nice to me. They have sent me phones left, right, and center. They've been super cordial. They've had no problems with any of the things that I do here, with not getting early copy or any editorial input on these reviews. They, as much as anyone, just turn me loose with their hardware. So I don't like saying this stuff, but it's just true. It's just not a great phone. I also have to point out there's a major flaw for me with the idea of this phone and the Nothing phone. The lights are on the back, which means in order for them to be useful, you got to put your phone face down. Who's doing that? That just seems insane to me. Otherwise, I mean, I guess with the case, You kind of get a little bit of glow on the outside, which might be useful, but it just seems like a concept that I don't think we need. I know some people hate the way it looks, the iPhone style camera bump. I wish it was more square. It would look better if it was a perfect square instead of a rectangle. I don't think it looks that bad. It's a little chonky, but that's kind of all it's got going for it, guys. It's just not a great phone. That's about all I've got to say about the Unihertz Luna. Guys, thanks for watching. As always, hit that subscribe button to not miss more content just like this. Another big thanks to Unihertz for sending this phone over to me. As I said earlier, they're seeing this review at the exact same time that you are. No early copy or editorial input was given, and no money changed hands. I will see you on the next one. And until next time, stay nerdy, my friends.